A girl who had never learned piano somehow played a world-famous piece. She had almost secretly glanced a couple of times while her mother was giving piano lessons to a wealthy heir named Jean Mock. Even world-renowned pianists might need several days to perform the piece smoothly on their first try. Yet Yusul played her flawlessly on her first attempt. Earlier, Jean Mock had been learning the same piece for over half a month, but he still couldn't meet his teacher's expectations. When the teacher pointed out his mistakes, he flew into a rage and even pressured his powerful father because Jean Mock had been praised as a piano prodigy since childhood. He believed his inability to play well was entirely the teacher's fault. Every day during lessons, he was also bothered by the presence of the teacher's daughter, Yusul. He had grown tired of the teacher who was playing. Her performance was not only smooth, but more beautiful than her mother's. Through her playing, she silently made it clear to Jean Mock. The problem wasn't the teacher. It was his own lack of understanding. Yusul's mother stood frozen in shock. She had never formally taught her daughter, and yet Yusul was performing at a level that rivaled professional pianists. It was then that she realized her daughter might truly be a once-in-a-generation genius, an oiled rich boy like Jean Mock. But the shame and injustice they endured that day would not be forgotten. 10 years passed in the blink of an eye. Yusul had grown into an undeniable piano prodigy, while Jean Mock, despite all the resources at his disposal, had fallen behind. Yusul had surpassed him in every conceivable way. On the day of an impression, Yusul, standing beside her mother, insisted on applying to be Jean Mock's page-turner. With just a slight delay in turning each page, she could ruin his performance. When Yusul made the offer, Jean Mock visibly panicked. The students in the audience watched eagerly, expecting drama. But to their surprise, Yusul didn't play any tricks. She turned even Jean Mock seemed unsettled. Later, Yusul calmly stated that she and Jean Mock weren't even on the same level. Resorting to petty-mindedness, Yusul's petty tactics would only drag her down. When it was her turn to perform, Jean Mock volunteered to be her page-turner. Her mother immediately opposed the idea, but Yusul ignored her. From then on, Jean Mock grew increasingly uncomfortable. At a crucial moment, he intentionally knocked the sheet music off the stand and pretended it was an accident. He looked around with feigned innocence and asked the judges for understanding. As he bent down to retrieve the sheet music, Yusul slapped his hand away, then closed her eyes and continued playing. She had already memorized the entire piece with her photographic memory and genius-level talent. Her performance didn't falter for even a moment. Naturally, she won first place. Jean Mock not only lost the competition, he lost his dignity. As he watched the mother and daughter walk away with grace and confidence, his heart filled with bitter envy. That night, Jean Mock went to a church and stood before a statue of Jesus. There, he made a cruel and hateful wish that Yusul would be forever trapped in darkness. Jean Mock's heart was filled with bitter envy. At that very moment, Jean Mock received a phone call. A classmate told him that Yusul had been in a car accident. A runaway truck had slammed into the passenger side of her vehicle, the side where she had been sitting. The crash had left her blind. Just as Jean Mock had made his malicious wish, fate answered in the cruelest way possible. Piano prodigy Yusul lost her sight in a car accident. Shockingly, her mother didn't seem concerned about her physical condition. Instead, Jean Mock said that she would never be able to play piano again. Her strong-willed nature simply made it hard for her to express love. When she stepped out again, she had regained her usual cold demeanor. Meanwhile, a heartbroken Yusul left her hospital room and accidentally bumped into a young man. She asked him how to get to the rooftop. Noticing that she was struggling to move around, the young man decided to escort her himself. Elsewhere, Jean Mock, who had been endlessly praying at the church after losing the piano competition, saw Yusul's blindness. He had just cursed her, and now something this tragic had happened. It couldn't be a coincidence, could it? That owed him. It felt like everything he took pride in was being effortlessly snatched away by her. Of course, he'd only made the curse out of frustration and jealousy. But upon hearing what had actually happened, Jean-Marc was overwhelmed with guilt. He felt as if he had somehow caused the accident. Filled with remorse, he brought flowers and went to the hospital to visit her. As he walked in, he saw the young man's arm walking past him. After dropping her off, the young man turned and left, now alone, felt her way toward the edge of the rooftop, and slowly climbed over the railing. She was ready to end her young life. Hearing the young man's voice again pushed her even deeper into despair. She blamed Jean-Marc for the humiliation her mother had suffered. She felt she had become a mere tool used by her mother to take revenge on Jean-Marc. Her mother had projected her own failed dreams of becoming a pianist onto Yusul, but she had no real expectations. Her childhood had lost all its color under this pressure. Because her hands were valuable, her mother never let her ride a bike. Even when Yusul suffered motion sickness, she was forced to recite piano pieces during car rides. Gradually, Yusul became nothing more than a vessel for her mother's vanity. She had once thought that losing her sight might be a good thing. It might finally set her free. Her genuine outburst of pain made Jean-Marc cry. Yusul was tired. She no longer wanted to pretend she loved the piano. With her eyes tightly shut, she leaned backward, letting herself fall. But nothing happened. Yusul was confused. Wasn't she supposed to be falling to her death? As it turned out, the young man had seen through her intentions long ago. He hadn't taken her to the rooftop at all. He had brought her to the parking garage instead. He understood her despair. After all, after returning to the hospital, the young man told his mother that he had saved a girl's life. His mother didn't care much. She was just relieved that her reckless son hadn't gotten into any more trouble. As they stepped outside, it had already begun to rain. The mother tried to open an umbrella, only for the top to shoot off like a missile into the sky. Chasik burst into laughter at the absurd sight before him. But as he laughed, tears began to roll down his face uncontrollably. In truth, Chasik saw him standing on that rooftop, ready to jump. Not long ago, during a youth pole vault championship, Chasik had only needed to win a bronze medal to secure admission to a top. His rival's parents laughed and mocked him, but Chasik's mother stood firm, her eyes full of belief. Chasik was determined to blaze his own path, not just for himself, but for his mother too. He summoned all his strength, powered through his legs, and tuned his body to perfect balance. Something went terribly wrong. At the hospital, initial tests revealed only a minor injury. Subscribe and like for part 2.